Hello and welcome. It is really, really good to be here. So how has your week been? I had an amazing day out yesterday. I was allowed out of the office, out to play.
I had an amazing day in yesterday. I got extreme amounts of work done. It was very productive when there was no one here to talk to.
So I'm back at work today, all fresh and raring to go, and really, really excited with all the things. We've got a great show for you, a great question about anxiety, and our topic today is balance. But before we dive into that, I just want to tell you about this book, The Warrior's Journey, just in case you don't know about it, just in case it's not on your radar. At the moment, we are on Relationship School. If you didn't join us, it's a great program. We're having great fun there. And yesterday, Bec used this book in Relationship School. She took a couple of quotes out of it to start the call.
Yeah, it was fab. I'd forgotten how good it was. And, you know, Deb wrote it back quite a few years ago, and then kind of we published it, I think, only maybe a year and a half ago. And it's been a while since I've actually read it, but it's one of those things we like to do when we're sharing with a group of people, is actually find something that we've written or is in another book to start things off. And I was just so pleasantly surprised about a book that I haven't picked up for a little while, how profound it is and how on point it is. So we just wanted to remind you about it.
Because it has been around. So if you haven't read it yet, it's got some good reviews. And like Bec says, we're actually doing the Warrior's Journey again at the moment, Bec and I. And yeah, it's making a difference, and we like that book. So it's on Amazon, or if you're unsure at all, if you've got any questions about it, feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, please do. And then the other program that we have got available, I think we've talked about before, but is well worth reminding you of, is our 30 days of self-love. That's an online challenge that you just get an email every day. It's self-study, so you just can dive in and do it at your own pace. And that's a little video every day from us with a little challenge. You know how we like to do our little challenges.
We love our challenges.
And that's on our website, dareToBeYou.co.uk. Well worth having a little go at. 30 fantastic days.
I do believe there's probably some challenges in the Warrior's Journey.
There definitely is, yeah. Most of what we do, there's challenges or home play. Because for us, this conversation invites you to get out in the world and see something for yourself, have your own experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And challenges and things like that are a great way to have an experience for yourself, because even if we hear something, it embeds it in us when we live life. This to me is, we listen to these calls, we hear something, and then we go out to play and see what's changed for us and come back. And the Warrior's Journey was actually documented some of the things that I did when I was getting to grips with this understanding, some of the things I would do out in the world and some of the things that I would see. So yeah, a couple of great things there, the Warrior's Journey and the 30 days of self-love. So on with the show. Our question today is, how can I ignore my anxiety when it is through the roof? And great question, by the way, really, really, really good question, because I know I have definitely had my moments when I have had anxiety that is through the roof. I totally know what that feels like. My heart beating out of my chest, can't think straight. Feels like mine goes into the back of something happens at the back of the base of my neck here. I don't know. It feels like someone's putting pressure on me there, and it's not nice. But what I would really, really, really like to point you back to here is how we work as human beings. What is actually going on? And this again is one of those things that it's really, really helpful to hear this. And what I have seen has changed for me when I am anxious and in those kinds of places, is that being in these conversations, sitting here and listening to what it is we're saying, opens our mind a little bit. And even then, when we are in the depth of our worst anxiety, something has shifted in our mind and something else can occur to us in those moments, which is why we love it when you go out and play in the world, because then if something occurs and you get anxious, you notice what's happened for you, you notice what has changed. So I want to point you back to the role that thought plays in your experience. So to me, when I used to suffer a lot with anxiety, what it really looked to me like was that there was a set of circumstances going on that needed to be different so that I could feel okay. Like, I used to be an incredibly anxious driver. That was where I've had panic attacks on the motorway. I actually had one panic attack, one of my worst panic attacks, while I was driving on the motorway, and I stopped my car on the motorway and got out of my car. My mum was in the car with me. She jumped in the driver's seat and she was screaming and having a hissy fit, and it wasn't great. And obviously it all turned out all right. But in that moment, it looked to me, my anxiety was telling me that I couldn't drive. And it was telling me that I needed different circumstances to be okay. And everything that we point to says that as human beings, we don't directly experience circumstances. What we experience is our thinking in the moment. What we experience is the thoughts that are passing through our head in any given moment, which is why we can pretty much get anxious about anything or equally not get anxious about the exact same thing. And for me, I think it's worth playing around with and just getting curious about how we work in that way. Probably when we're in a calm state. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I think that was the kind of thing that was coming to me, is that when you're kind of asking the question, how do I ignore my anxiety when it's through the roof? For me, it's about not waiting until your anxiety is through the roof. And I know I've used this metaphor before, learning to swim when you're drowning. It's almost too late then. It's like what's going to happen at that point is going to happen. But if you've learned to swim and then you find yourself in deep waters, you'll know what to do. That learning, that knowing will come through you. And that very much is the same here. And the thing that kind of, for me, around anxiety and panic attacks and that kind of that feeling and that experience that goes on for us, is seeing that that's our body's alarm clock. That's our body's way of saying something's a little off kilter here. That's an invitation for you to explore. And I think by asking the question, it's clear that people are ready to explore this. Yeah. And do that now. Hopefully in this moment, as you're listening to this, you're not in the middle of kind of panic attacks and anxiety, but actually becoming really familiar with this conversation. I was talking last night on relationship school. Actually, I did the call on my own because Deb was out, as she said, having a fantastic day out. So, and one of the people on relationship school asked a question about kind of almost like, how do I remember that? What we're saying here is get to know how you work, get to see that your body can share those things with you in a way to invite you to look again. How do you remember that in those moments, was kind of her question. But she kind of asked the question and then beautifully answered it all for herself, which was wonderful. And kind of what her answer to herself was to come back to this conversation when she's not in those moments. Yeah. When she's not in the midst of feeling worried about something or, those kinds of situations. And kind of, I loved her answer. And then I kind of came in, and what came for me was, this conversation, what we're pointing to, isn't just about the external stuff, like our show here or reading our book or whatever way you find yourself listening to people or hearing about this. This conversation is internal. Absolutely. This starts, internally. And what, for me, that then something wakes up in me, something comes alive in me when those moments are happening. When my anxiety, if I have anxiety or anything, I have all sorts of emotions. Fear's been one
human beings tend to
a bit recently. And when that is happening, because I've purposely invited myself to be in this conversation, something comes alive in me in those moments. Where in the past I would have, like Deb, I've had, I've not been on a motorway and got out of my car, thankfully.
I would highly not recommend it.
But there has been moments myself where that anxiety has been what you might describe as through the roof, unmanageable, beyond anything I feel I can cope with. If that happens for me now, if I have those moments where I'm feeling some kind of feeling that is a little bit beyond what I would like it to be, then something comes alive in me. At some point, I know I can trust that this conversation is a conversation I've started internally on purpose, and it comes through, and it might not be instant. I definitely have those moments where I'm kind of sitting there. I had one yesterday, a little bit. I got a little bit anxious, a little bit in my head, because my partner hadn't messaged me for more hours than was normal in our relationship. And, you know, my mind does that thing. It does that, oh, something's happened to him. You know, he's had an accident and no one's thought to tell me, or obviously he could have been kidnapped by alien, you know, and all those things, they go on in my head.
It's one of those, isn't it? It's like, oh yeah, my kids haven't, oh, dead, obviously dead.
Yeah.
Oh, dead, obviously dead. Yeah, something, oh, obviously, yeah, dead.
That's it, you know.
It's what our mind does, isn't it?
That is what our mind does. And what I noticed happens for me when that happens is, at some point, that other part of me, that kind of conversation that's alive in me goes, and what if it isn't that? And if it is that, how is anxiety going to help that? You know, if something has happened to my partner, I am of way more value to him if I'm in a clear mind. If I'm, you know, if I've lost the plot and I'm just completely anxious and overridden with that, I'm not going to be of service to him anyway. So it's, for me, something comes at some point, and I know I can trust that. I've seen it happen too many times to think that it won't happen.
I think when it comes for us in that way, it comes in a way that is something we can trust.
Yes.
Because the thing I have noticed about this conversation and our minds opening, and I know we were talking about this before the show today, is that people get something that's helpful for them.
Yeah.
Like if you're having a panic attack in front of me and I try to calm you down, I'm going to give you what's useful to me. And that may be useful to you, but what comes from your own mind, what your own wisdom, what your own inner voice, whatever it is, brings to you is way, way, way more helpful. And even sometimes people will tell me what's coming for them and I'm thinking, well, I wouldn't have thought that, and that wouldn't have helped me at all. But it's really, you know, when you talk about what comes for you, you know, and maybe it's like, well, really, will being anxious help you? If some people, if you try to say that to yourself, that might even make your anxiety go up a bit.
Yeah.
So it's not using someone else's stuff,
wisdom. Yeah.
but it is absolutely what you're pointing to, is that you have wisdom that gives something to you that is helpful for you.
Yeah.
And definitely having this conversation, being a part of this conversation, both externally and internally, in some way or other, is incredibly helpful. And also your wisdom tells you when to do that. You know, sometimes I'm just in conversation in my own head, and sometimes I read something, and sometimes I listen to something, and sometimes I talk to someone, and it's a variety of ways to be in this conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, you know, to kind of go back to the absolute of the question, which is how can I ignore my anxiety? I think for me it's like seeing that if you're meant to ignore your anxiety, exactly like we've just talked about there, that will come to you to do that. Because I've seen times when ignoring my anxiety, ignoring that kind of feeling in me, is absolutely available and possible to me. And I've seen times when it just isn't. I'm in that feeling, and ignoring it just doesn't come as an option, particularly in that moment. But what I know is that if I need to ignore it, and one of the things that used to be a big thing for me was when I was driving, a lot like Ted was saying, I used to get quite nervous, and I still can. And I see most of the time it's available to me to just ignore that and drive anyway.
Yeah.
And other times it doesn't come to me to have that experience. It doesn't come to me. It doesn't feel like it's quite so available. But even in that, because I'm in this conversation, I'm looking for my wisdom, it comes to me, for something else comes to me. And it might be, don't drive for 5 minutes, you know, give yourself some space before you get in the car. All sorts of things come to me. And so if ignoring it doesn't feel available to you, that's okay too. Because whether you know it or not, your anxiety doesn't stay through the roof. It can't sustain, we can't sustain that emotion. You know, we can't, that isn't how we work.
Calm down on its own. Yeah. And interestingly, the person that actually asked this question and said that, this was a person who was anxious, and it was actually like, oh, so you're just saying ignore my anxiety. And that was obviously, that hadn't occurred to this person. And by the way they said it, it was obvious that, oh gosh, I can do that. That's available. And then it was kind of like, but how do I do that? And it's almost like, if you have had that as an option, the how do I do it is, again, look within yourself, because if we get curious about these things, you could really tell that this person had seen, oh, ignoring my anxiety is an option, whereas that had never even looked like it was on the table before. And then it's like, but how do I do that? And that's our fear kind of coming back up again, isn't it? Whereas if we just allow, if that possibility has entered our mind, if that has looked like a possibility, then at some point that this opening of our mind will make it available. And like Bec said, the thing is, our moment-to-moment experience of this can be different. I do not experience anxiety the way I used to, and I don't experience it the same each time I have it. It doesn't come through me in the exact same way every time. And like you said, sometimes it's totally, oh yeah, that one I'm just going to take no notice of.
Yeah.
Or this one, I'm going to actually look at this feeling and be in this feeling and enter it. And there's not a right and wrong. I think the biggest thing here is to point out, you have inner wisdom, you have inner guidance. Know yourself, know this, and you will know the right thing for you to do in any given moment. And if you are listening to this and you're here with us on the show and you're in this conversation, that is absolutely a brilliant way to look at this, and a brilliant way to be around this. And so moving on so to our topic. So our topic this week is a very interesting one. It is balance. And it's what I've noticed happening for me over the last few days and weeks is it's a little bit like, have you ever had that experience when you're going to buy a new car and you look around and you decide on what kind of car it's going to be, and then it feels like every other car you see on the road is a car like the one you're going to buy, and it was like they just weren't there before and now they are everywhere. And what I've really seen with everything that is going on in the world, it looks like we have been looking at we talk a lot about a pendulum swing and being, one side or the other side, and then this place of balance in the middle. And we talk about it in many different ways. We talk about our humanity and our spirituality and the place of balance. We talk about love and fear and the place of balance. We talk about people pleasing and people squashing and the place of balance. And it just feels like we've had so many examples of that over the last few days and weeks coming at us in many, many ways. And just last night, Boris made another announcement about the situation where, I don't know whether you're watching this, when it's come out, or whether this is a video you're going back to. But at the moment, we're in the middle of incredibly strange times throughout the world, really. We're all living through incredibly strange times. And I know one of the things that has been really calling to Bec is love and fear. These are the two places, that we can come from. Are we coming from love or are we coming from fear? And to me, when I think about that, the pendulum and the place of balance in that is, it feels like an awful lot of people with everything that is going on. It feels like there's some bullying going on, and then it feels like there's some fear going on. And what I'm really, really curious about is, what is the place of balance in between those two things? And how can we come back to balance around those two things? How can we come from, instead of coming from fear, instead of coming from people pleasing or people squashing, instead of coming from there, what is our place of balance there? And I think for us, I know our invitation has definitely been to come from love. And I think, our invitation to you is to find that place of balance and love in you too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what, for me, it has been, is that the place of balance is love. And kind of, because I love the pendulum, I love finding the things that sit on either end, so that I can then come to balance. and the thing that I've kind of has been toying around in my mind for the last sort of 24 hours is that if love is the place of balance, then on one end you've sort of got fear, that sort of afraid to do stuff, afraid to go out into the world or share what's occurring to you to share, afraid of what might go on. And the other end of that is anger. For me at the moment, I see that being the two things I can swing between. Anger about what's going on, anger about what we're being asked to do and give up, and those, I can have lots of stories about that. How dare I be told to do this? How dare I be asked to not do these things? And then I can see between those two things, the place in the middle is love, isn't it? That's the balance here. And I think for me, like, we talk about balance, and we picked that this week because the last 2 weeks we've talked about being human and our spiritual nature, and balance always follows that for me, because we get to turn up and be human. We get to turn up and do the things that we want to do, or even the things we don't want to do as a human being. You know, we get to go, oh, I'm going to wear a scarf this morning, or a necklace this morning, or, you know, I'm going to sit and read a book. I've got a stack there waiting to be read, as you can see. You know, I'm going to sit and read a book, or I'm going to watch something on television, or I'm going to go for. We get to be human. We get to be very human. We get to have those experiences of anxiety and panic attacks that we talked about. We get to have amazing relationships and wonderful holidays and just all sorts of things.
And fabulous days out in the office.
Fabulous days when no one else is in the office and we get loads done. And then we have this spiritual essence of who we are that for the most part in a lot of our lives we don't even know about, we don't get told about, we don't know that it's there. But we have moments where we sort of do. We have those experiences that we can look back on and go, that was weird, wasn't it? Almost that was extraordinary that occurred. That we were with somebody last week who we were walking through a village and they bumped into somebody that they knew from, you know, wherever, you know, from where they live, 300-400 miles away, in this very small remote village in North Devon. Just happened to be that the exact time we walked past, they walked out of the door of a pub and they kind of went, oh my gosh, what are you doing here? I'm moving, I'm getting a holiday home here. What? In, you know, in the very town, that very village that I happen to be in today. And kind of those moments that happen in our lives, we can be very good at just writing them off almost as, oh yeah, odd things happen. But those things are just little pointers to remind us that more is going on here than just that kind of human level, just those human experiences we get. There's a kind of essence of synchronicity to life that we get invited to spot that, to see it, to know that it's going on. And for me, that balance is seeing those two things in harmony, is seeing that that is happening all the time, that every moment we get to have is extraordinary, and every moment we get to have is perfectly human and ordinary. And those two things just dance together so beautifully. And knowing that, for me, being reminded of that is what then brings me back, to go back to the previous pendulum, the fear, the anger, the love, brings me back to that space of love.
Yeah. And I absolutely see that the most powerful thing that we have is love. When we move into anger or fear or control or all of those things that I know can be go-to places for me, and from conversations I've had with other people, I can see that we go into, I have to control this, I have to be in control here, or, you know, I'm fearful here, I don't know what to do, or I'm angry about this. Those kinds of stances that it's very human and it's very easy to take. But what I have seen is that when we move into love, when we find that place within ourselves, and all of us, every single one of us, no exceptions, that is what is at our core. That is what I'm not pointing to an emotion you feel about someone. I'm pointing to the actual essence, the intelligence of who you are, that creative stuff. And the word that I really like to put on it, the word that makes sense to me, is that it is love. It is creative intelligence. That is love. And all of us have that. And that is the most powerful thing on this planet. And I know we've had conversations with people about studies that have been done, that when people come together in that place, crime rates go down. We have an impact. And what I've seen is our own relationships are like microcosms of what is going on in the world. So for me, it looks that if I look within me and I show up as love in my own relationships, like with Bec, with my partner, with my children, if I find my place of balance in me with those things, it balances the world too. The world comes back to some kind of balance. And I can come from this very, very powerful place of love in all things, because that is the power that is going to bring bring back, when we find that we are back in balance, and that is what is going to help us make sense of our anxiety and all of those things, coming back to that place of love within us.
So we wanted to finish today with a recommended resource. We think it's extremely helpful, I think, as we've already said, to be in this conversation, to be exploring. And there's so much good stuff out there that people are putting out. And so I wanted to just recommend a little video to you. I actually found it yesterday because the question that we've answered today is very similar to a question we got in our Facebook group yesterday, Ask Us Anything Tuesday. And I did a little video on that anyway, but I also found Dr. Bill Pettit talks about anxiety and panic attacks, and he does very beautiful, I think it's only about 6 or 7 minutes long. It's a really nice little video, and he is a doctor, as his name suggests, and also shares the same understanding that we do. So I think we'll put a link below wherever this video is so you can find it easily, but you can very quickly go on YouTube and put in Dr. Bill Pettit anxiety or panic attacks. I think it will come up anyway, but we'll make sure there's a link below.
I'll make sure the link is below.
I highly recommend, if that is something you're a little bit unsure about and want to know a bit more about how this conversation can help around that, I highly recommend go and have one. And even if anxiety isn't particularly your thing, he's a lovely one to listen to anyway.
A great man.
Yeah, go and have a little listen. We'll put that below.
So next week our topic is going to be knowing yourself.
I mean, you know, how we're going to cover that in just a short 10 or 15 minutes. As you are the entire universe, that might take a little longer, but we'll see. And our question next week is, how do I not ruin my relationship?
Wow, great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. Shamelessly stolen from Russell Brand, because we heard him talk about that the other day.
Yeah, we did. He did a great talk on that.
Yeah.
So if you would like to see more of us, you can join our Facebook group. You can join our mailing list. We're always up to something. We're always sharing something that's going on. And we would really, really, really love you to join our community. So
absolutely, yes. We're always around somewhere. So.
We are. And all the links to everywhere you can find us will be under this video, wherever it is that you're watching it.
Yeah. Have a lovely evening.
Have a great time, and we will see you somewhere soon.
Bye.
Bye.